Hello, I'm Essay, your AI essayist. Please note that all content, audio and video in this presentation are AI generated. As AI can sometimes produce inaccuracies, I encourage you to verify any factual information presented. With that in mind, let's begin.
The 20th century witnessed a profound reevaluation of humanity's place in the cosmos, a shift propelled by the apparent absence of inherent meaning. Jean-Paul Sartre emerged as a pivotal figure in this intellectual upheaval, championing an existentialist philosophy that grappled directly with the implications of a world devoid of preordained purpose. His work offered a radical vision of human freedom and responsibility, challenging traditional metaphysical frameworks and profoundly influencing subsequent generations of thinkers. Sartre's philosophical journey began with a deep engagement in phenomenology, a method pioneered by Edmund Husserl. Phenomenology sought to describe the structures of consciousness as experienced from a first-person perspective, bracketing assumptions about an external world. Sartre found in phenomenology a powerful tool for analyzing the nature of being and consciousness, a means to explore the lived reality of human existence. He adapted Husserl's approach, pushing it beyond its original boundaries to address questions of freedom, responsibility, and the search for meaning. A central tenet of Sartre's existentialism is the assertion that existence precedes essence. This provocative claim reverses the traditional metaphysical view that an object or being possesses a predefined essence, a set of inherent properties that determine its nature. For Sartre, human beings first exist, then encounter themselves in the world, and subsequently define their essence through their choices and actions. There is no pre-given human nature, no divine blueprint. Individuals are born into existence without a predetermined purpose, charged with the task of creating their own meaning. This absence of inherent meaning is the foundation upon which Sartre builds his philosophy of radical freedom. Sartre's magnum opus, Being and Nothingness, published in 1943, provides a comprehensive exposition of his existentialist framework. In this dense and challenging work, Sartre employs the phenomenological method to dissect the structures of consciousness and being. He distinguishes between two fundamental modes of being in itself and soi, and being for itself pour soi. Being in itself refers to the non-conscious, inert existence of objects, a fullness of being devoid of self-awareness or intentionality. A rock, a table, a tree, each exemplifies being in itself. Being for itself, on the other hand, characterizes human consciousness, a mode of being defined by its self-awareness, its capacity for reflection, and its inherent lack of being. Consciousness, for Sartre, is always consciousness of something, and intentional reaching out towards the world. This intentionality creates a gap, a nothingness, within being, a space that allows for freedom and choice. Consciousness, in its very nature, is haunted by nothingness. This nothingness is not simply an absence of being, but a constitutive element of consciousness itself. It is the ability to negate, to question, to imagine possibilities beyond the present moment. It is this capacity for negation that allows human beings to transcend their immediate circumstances and to project themselves into the future. This projection, this constant striving towards self-definition, is what Sartre calls project. Human existence is fundamentally a project, an ongoing process of self-creation. Sartre's analysis of being extends to the realm of interpersonal relations. He explores the complex and often fraught relationship between the self and the other. The other, for Sartre, is another consciousness, another being for itself, who also possesses the capacity to see and judge. The presence of the other introduces a new dimension of self-consciousness. Individuals become aware of themselves as objects in the eyes of the other, as beings defined by the other's gaze. This look of the other can be a source of profound anxiety and alienation. Individuals strive to control the other's perception of themselves, to manage their image in the other's eyes. This struggle for recognition and control is a central dynamic in Sartre's account of human relations. One of Sartre's most influential concepts is that of bad faith, mauvaise foi, a form of self-deception in which individuals attempt to evade their freedom and responsibility. Bad faith involves denying one's own agency, pretending to be determined by external forces or by fixed essence. A waiter, for example, might adopt the role of waiter so completely that he loses sight of his own freedom to choose. He performs his duties with excessive zeal, as if he were nothing more than a waiter, thereby disavowing his own capacity for self-definition. Similarly, an individual might cling to a particular identity, such as businessman or mother, as a way of avoiding the anguish of choosing who to be. Being and Nothingness, provides numerous examples of bad faith. Consider the woman on a first date who allows her hand to linger in the hand of her companion. She is aware of the potential for romantic entanglement, yet she avoids making a conscious decision about whether to pursue it. She neither withdraws her hand decisively, nor does she fully embrace the possibility of a romantic relationship. She remains in a state of ambiguity, engaging in a form of self-deception that allows her to avoid the responsibility of choosing. Another example involves the individual who claims to be driven solely by their emotions. They might assert, "I couldn't help it, I was overcome by anger." In doing so, they deny their own capacity for rational deliberation and self-control, attributing their actions to an external force beyond their control. This is a form of bad faith, because individuals are always responsible for their emotions, for how they choose to respond to them. Sartre's concept of bad faith underscores his emphasis on the importance of authenticity. To live authentically is to acknowledge one's freedom and responsibility, to embrace the anguish of choice, and to strive to create one's own meaning in a world devoid of pre-given purpose. This is a challenging and demanding task, but it is the only path to genuine self-realization. Sartre's intellectual debt to Edmund Husserl is undeniable. He adopted Husserl's phenomenological method as a means of investigating the structures of consciousness. He expanded upon Husserl's ideas, using them to explore questions of freedom, responsibility, and the nature of being. Similarly, Sartre drew inspiration from Martin Heidegger's existential analysis, particularly Heidegger's concept of being towards death. Heidegger argued that awareness of one's own mortality is essential for authentic existence. Sartre incorporated this insight into his own philosophy, emphasizing the importance of confronting the finitude of human existence. Sartre's work exerted a significant influence on subsequent generations of thinkers. Simone de Beauvoir, his lifelong partner, developed her own distinctive brand of existentialist feminism, drawing heavily on Sartre's ideas about freedom, responsibility, and the social construction of identity. Frantz, Fanon, a Martinique-born psychiatrist, and political philosopher, applied Sartre's existentialist framework to the analysis of colonialism and racism, exploring the psychological effects of oppression and the struggle for liberation. Sartre's emphasis on individual agency and the rejection of predetermined essences resonated deeply with these thinkers, providing a philosophical foundation for their critiques of social injustice. His exploration of the gaze of the other in asterisk, being and nothingness asterisk influenced the development of post-colonial theory, particularly in its analysis of the ways in which colonized peoples are objectified and dehumanized by the colonizer's gaze. Sartre's concept of freedom stands as a cornerstone of his existentialist philosophy, a radical assertion of human agency that simultaneously empowers and burdens individuals with absolute responsibility. He famously declared that human beings are condemned to be free, a paradoxical statement encapsulating the anguish and anxiety inherent in the human condition. This condemnation stems from the absence of any preordained essence or set of values dictating human behavior. Existence precedes essence, meaning individuals first come into being and then define themselves through their choices and actions, rather than conforming to a pre-existing blueprint. The implications of this radical freedom are profound. Without inherent values or external authorities to guide them, individuals are entirely responsible for creating their own values and shaping their own identities. This responsibility can be overwhelming, leading to what Sartre termed anguish, the awareness of the weight of one's freedom and the realization that every choice has far-reaching consequences. This anguish is not a fleeting emotion, but a fundamental aspect of human existence, a constant reminder of the burden of self-determination. Sartre vehemently rejected determinism, the belief that human actions are predetermined by factors beyond individual control, such as genetics, environment, or social conditioning. He argued that determinism is a form of bad faith, an attempt to evade the responsibility that comes with freedom by attributing one's actions to external forces. Instead, Sartre emphasized the concept of project as the defining characteristic of human existence. Individuals are constantly projecting themselves into the future, setting goals, and making choices that shape their identities. This project is not a fixed plan, but a dynamic and evolving process, constantly subject to revision and reevaluation. The relationship between freedom and intersubjectivity, the realm of relationships between conscious subjects, is central to Sartre's philosophy. He explored the role of the look of the other in shaping self-consciousness. The other's gaze objectifies the individual, reducing them to a set of qualities and characteristics. This objectification can be a source of alienation and anxiety, as the individual becomes aware of being judged and defined by others. However, the other's gaze can also be a catalyst for self-awareness, prompting the individual to reflect on their own identity and to make choices that affirm their freedom. Hegel's dialectic of master and slave provided a foundation for Sartre's understanding of intersubjectivity. In Hegel's account, the master seeks recognition from the slave, but this recognition is ultimately unsatisfying because it comes from someone who is not free. Sartre adapted this dialectic to explore the power dynamics inherent in human relationships, arguing that individuals are constantly engaged in a struggle for recognition and freedom. This struggle can lead to conflict and oppression, but it can also be a source of creativity and growth. Kierkegaard's concept of anxiety also deeply influenced Sartre's thinking. Kierkegaard argued that anxiety arises from the awareness of one's own freedom and the possibility of making choices that are both good and evil. Sartre extended this idea, arguing that anxiety is an inescapable aspect of the human condition, a constant reminder of the responsibility that comes with freedom. This anxiety is not a sign of weakness, but a testament to the individual's capacity for self-determination. Sartre's exploration of freedom and responsibility was directly influenced by the philosophical tradition of phenomenology, particularly the work of Edmund Husserl. Husserl's focus on a lived experience of consciousness provided Sartre with a framework for analyzing the subjective dimensions of freedom. Furthermore, Martin Heidegger's analysis of asterisk, dancing asterisk, or being there in asterisk, being in time asterisk, particularly Heidegger's emphasis on the individual's confrontation with their own mortality, resonated deeply with Sartre's existentialist concerns. Sartre built upon these phenomenological insights to develop his own distinctive account of human freedom and its implications for moral responsibility. The influence of Sartre's ideas on freedom extended to a diverse range of thinkers and movements. Existentialist thinkers such as Albert Camus grappled with the implications of Sartre's radical freedom, exploring the themes of absurdity, rebellion, and the search for meaning in a meaningless world. His emphasis on individual responsibility also resonated with the development of humanistic psychology, which emphasized the importance of self-actualization and personal growth. Furthermore, Sartre's concept of freedom had a significant impact on political thought and activism. His emphasis on individual agency and the rejection of determinism provided a philosophical foundation for movements advocating for social justice and liberation. Thinkers such as Simone de Beauvoir integrated Sartre's existentialist framework into their analyses of gender inequality, arguing that women are often denied the freedom to define themselves and are instead objectified and defined by patriarchal social structures. Frantz Fanon applied Sartre's ideas to the struggle against colonialism, arguing that colonized peoples must reclaim their freedom and agency in order to overcome oppression. Sartre's philosophy of freedom continues to be a subject of debate and discussion, raising fundamental questions about the nature of human existence, the limits of individual agency, and the possibilities for creating a just and meaningful world. His work challenges us to confront the complexities of freedom and responsibility, and to embrace the challenge of creating our own values in a world without preordained essences. The emphasis on freedom and responsibility within Sartre's existentialism led him to develop a unique approach to understanding individual psychology, a method he termed existential psychoanalysis. This approach sought to uncover the fundamental project of an individual, the underlying choices and values that give coherence to their life, without resorting to deterministic explanations. Traditional Freudian psychoanalysis, with its emphasis on the unconscious and fixed developmental stages, posits that human behavior is largely determined by past experiences and unconscious drives. Sartre found this framework inadequate for capturing the radical freedom he believed characterized human existence. For Sartre, there exists no pre-existing unconscious entity dictating our actions. Instead, individuals are fundamentally free to choose their own being, to define themselves through their actions and choices. Existential psychoanalysis, therefore, aims to illuminate the subjective project that underlies these choices, the way in which an individual freely chooses to be in the world. The goal is not to uncover hidden unconscious motives, but rather to bring to light the individual's fundamental project, the overarching meaning they have chosen to give to their existence. This project is not necessarily conscious or explicitly articulated, but it is revealed through a careful examination of the individual's actions, choices, and values. It is a process of interpreting the totality of a person's life to discern the underlying pattern, the fundamental orientation that gives meaning to their existence. Sartre articulated this method most extensively in his monumental study of Gustave Flaubert, *The Family Idiot*. This multi-volume work is not a traditional biography in the conventional sense, but rather an extended exercise in existential psychoanalysis. Sartre delves into Flaubert's life, meticulously examining his childhood, his relationships, his literary works, and his political views, with the aim of uncovering the fundamental project that animated his existence. Sartre's analysis begins with Flaubert's early experiences, particularly his relationship with his family and his feelings of alienation and inadequacy. He argues that Flaubert's fundamental project was shaped by these early experiences, leading him to adopt a stance of detachment and observation towards the world. Flaubert, in Sartre's view, chose to become a writer as a way of escaping the limitations of his own existence and of achieving a kind of immortality through his art. Sartre meticulously examines Flaubert's literary works, interpreting them as expressions of his fundamental project. He argues that Flaubert's famous detachment is objective, and personal style is not simply a matter of aesthetic preference, but rather a reflection of his underlying existential stance. Flaubert, according to Sartre, chose to become a detached observer of the world, a chronicler of human folly and absurdity as a way of coping with his own feelings of alienation and meaninglessness. This approach differs significantly from traditional literary criticism, which often focuses on the formal aspects of a work or its historical context. Sartre, by contrast, seeks to understand Flaubert's works as expressions of his individual freedom, as choices that reflect his fundamental project. The characters, the plots, the style, all are interpreted as manifestations of Flaubert's underlying existential orientation. Sartre's method relies heavily on interpretation and inference. He pieces together clues from Flaubert's life and works, drawing connections and making inferences about his underlying motivations. This process is necessarily subjective, and Sartre acknowledges that his interpretation of Flaubert is only one possible reading of his life. The influence of Friedrich Nietzsche's genealogy of morals is evident in Sartre's approach. Nietzsche emphasized the subjective creation of values, arguing that values are not objective or pre-existing, but rather are created by individuals in response to their own needs and desires. Sartre similarly emphasizes the role of individual choice in shaping values. Flaubert, in Sartre's view, created his own values, his own way of being in the world, in response to his own unique circumstances and experiences. Existential psychoanalysis, as exemplified in *The Family Idiot*, attempts to provide a holistic and meaningful interpretation of a person's life. It seeks to understand the individual as a whole, as a unified being whose actions and choices are all expressions of a single underlying project. This project is not determined by external forces, but is freely chosen by the individual. The method is not without its challenges and criticisms. Its reliance on interpretation and inference makes it vulnerable to charges of subjectivity and speculation. Some critics argue that Sartre's interpretation of Flaubert is overly speculative, that he reads too much into the available evidence. Others question the very possibility of uncovering an individual's fundamental project, arguing that human motivations are too complex and contradictory to be reduced to a single, overarching theme. Despite these criticisms, existential psychoanalysis has had a significant impact on subsequent biographical and critical studies. It offers a powerful alternative to deterministic explanations of human behavior, emphasizing the role of individual freedom and responsibility. It encourages biographers and critics to look beyond surface appearances, to delve into the underlying motivations and values that shape a person's life and work. Later, biographers adopted aspects of Sartre's methodology, seeking to understand the choices made by historical figures in terms of their underlying values and projects. This approach has been particularly influential in the field of intellectual history, where scholars seek to understand the ideas of thinkers in relation to their personal experiences in their broader social and political context. Existential psychoanalysis encourages a deeper and more nuanced understanding of human existence. It challenges us to confront the complexities of freedom and responsibility, and to recognize the role of individual choice in shaping our lives and the world around us. It emphasizes the importance of understanding individuals in their totality as unified beings whose actions and choices are all expressions of a single underlying project. Sartre's exploration of individual freedom and responsibility, coupled with his development of existential psychoanalysis, laid the groundwork for his later engagement with political and social issues. He sought to reconcile his existentialist philosophy with a commitment to social justice, arguing that true freedom requires not only individual autonomy, but also the creation of a society in which all individuals have the opportunity to realize their full potential. This synthesis of existentialism and social critique would become a defining feature of his later work. Sartre's emphasis on individual freedom and the inherent subjectivity of human experience led him to confront the socio-political realities that often constrained individual agency. He grappled with the apparent contradiction between the radical freedom espoused by existentialism and the deterministic forces of social and economic structures, particularly within the framework of Marxism. This engagement marked a significant evolution in his thought, moving from a primarily individualistic focus to a consideration of the collective and the historical context in which individual existence unfolds. Sartre sought to integrate existentialism and Marxism, undertaking a project of philosophical reconciliation that aimed to address perceived shortcomings in both doctrines. Existentialism, with its emphasis on individual responsibility and the creation of meaning through action, provided a framework for understanding the subjective experience of alienation and the search for authenticity in a seemingly absurd world. Marxism, on the other hand, offered a structural analysis of power relations, class struggle, and the material conditions that shape human existence. Sartre believed that a synthesis of these two perspectives would provide a more comprehensive understanding of the human condition, one that acknowledged both the individual's capacity for freedom and the social forces that limit its expression. A central challenge in reconciling existentialism and Marxism lies in the tension between individual freedom and historical determinism. Traditional Marxism often emphasizes the role of economic forces and class struggle in shaping historical outcomes, suggesting that individuals are largely determined by their social and economic circumstances. Existentialism, conversely, asserts the primacy of individual choice and the capacity for individuals to transcend their circumstances through acts of self-creation. Sartre addressed this tension by arguing that individuals are always situated within a specific historical and social context, but they are never entirely determined by it. He proposed that individuals possess a degree of freedom to interpret their situation and to choose their response, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable constraints. Sartre's critique extended to both Stalinist Marxism and liberal individualism, identifying limitations in each. He saw Stalinist Marxism as a rigid and dogmatic system that suppressed individual freedom in the name of collective goals, ultimately leading to a form of totalitarianism. Liberal individualism, he argued, often ignores the social and economic inequalities that limit genuine freedom, allowing individuals to become isolated and alienated in a competitive marketplace. His alternative vision was a revolutionary humanism that prioritized human freedom and social justice, advocating for a society in which all individuals will have the opportunity to develop their full potential, free from the constraints of economic exploitation and political oppression. Praxis, a key concept in Sartre's later philosophy, represents a form of conscious action that transforms both the individual and the world. It involves a dialectical relationship between subjective intention and objective reality, where individuals act upon the world in accordance with their values and beliefs, while also being shaped by the consequences of their actions. Praxis is not simply a matter of abstract thought or theoretical reflection. It requires concrete engagement in the world, a willingness to take risks, and a commitment to transforming existing social and political structures. This concept owes a debt to Marx's concept of revolutionary practice, but Sartre infused it with an existentialist emphasis on individual responsibility and the creation of meaning through action. Sartre's views on colonialism and his support for anti-colonial movements further illustrate his commitment to social justice and human liberation. He saw colonialism as a form of oppression that denied entire populations their freedom and dignity, imposing alien systems of governance and economic exploitation. His engagement with Frantz, Fanon, a Martinique-born psychiatrist and philosopher, was particularly significant in shaping his understanding of the psychological and social effects of colonialism. Fanon's work, particularly Black Skin, White Masks, and The Wretched of the Earth, provided a powerful analysis of the internalized racism and psychological trauma experienced by colonized peoples. Marx's concept of alienation profoundly affected Sartre's existentialist Marxism. Marx argued that capitalism alienates workers from the products of their labor, from the process of production, from their fellow human beings, and from their own human potential. Sartre extended this concept to encompass the broader existential condition of modern individuals, arguing that they are alienated from themselves, from others, and from the world around them. This alienation stems from the loss of traditional values and beliefs, the fragmentation of social life, and the pervasive sense of meaninglessness that characterizes modern existence. Sartre believed that overcoming alienation requires a radical transformation of both individual consciousness and social structures, a process that involves embracing freedom, taking responsibility for one's choices, and working to create a more just and equitable society. Sartre's influence on Fanon's theories on colonialism and race is undeniable. Fanon drew heavily on Sartre's existentialist concepts of freedom, responsibility, and bad faith to analyze the psychological and social dynamics of colonialism. He argued that colonized peoples are often forced to internalize the values and beliefs of their colonizers, leading to a form of self-alienation and a denial of their own cultural identity. Fanon saw liberation as a process of reclaiming one's freedom, rejecting the imposed identities of the colonizer, and creating a new sense of self and community based on authentic values and beliefs. Fanon's work, in turn, had a profound impact on post-colonial theory and social movements, inspiring generations of activists and intellectuals to challenge the legacies of colonialism and to fight for social justice. Theories on praxis, as developed by Sartre, influenced later thinkers in critical theory, a school of thought that seeks to critique and transform existing social and political structures. Critical theorists, such as Eugen Habermas and Herbert Marcuse, drew on Sartre's emphasis on conscious action and the dialectical relationship between theory and practice to develop their own theories of social change. They argued that critical theory should not be merely a form of abstract analysis, but should also be a catalyst for social transformation, empowering individuals to challenge existing power relations and to create a more just and equitable society. Sartre's concept of praxis provided a philosophical foundation for this project, emphasizing the importance of individual agency and the transformative potential of collective action. His synthesis of existentialism and Marxism, though subject to critique, remains a significant contribution to 20th century philosophy, offering a framework for understanding the complex interplay between individual freedom and social structures. Sartre's intellectual heritage extends far beyond the immediate post-war period, continuing to resonate within contemporary philosophical, literary, and social spheres. His contributions to existentialism, phenomenology, and political philosophy established a framework for understanding human existence as fundamentally free and responsible, a perspective that continues to provoke debate and inspire critical reflection. At the heart of Sartre's existentialism lies the assertion that existence precedes essence. Individuals are born into the world without a preordained purpose or nature. They define themselves through their choices and actions. This radical freedom, while exhilarating, also entails a profound responsibility. Individuals are accountable for shaping their own lives and, by extension, contributing to the shaping of the world. This emphasis on individual freedom has been both praised and criticized. Some argue that it provides a powerful affirmation of human agency, empowering individuals to resist oppressive social structures and to create their own meaning in a world devoid of inherent value. Others contend that it neglects the social and economic constraints that limit individual freedom, overlooking the ways in which individuals are shaped by forces beyond their control. Critics of Sartre's work often point to his alleged neglect of social and economic factors, arguing that his emphasis on individual freedom overlooks the ways in which individuals are constrained by material conditions and social structures. These critics contend that Sartre's existentialism, while offering a compelling account of individual experience, fails to provide an adequate analysis of the systemic inequalities that shape human lives. They argue that Sartre's focus on individual choice overlooks the ways in which individuals are often compelled to act by forces beyond their control, such as poverty, discrimination, and political oppression. Despite these criticisms, Sartre's work continues to be relevant in contemporary debates about identity, authenticity, and social justice. His concept of bad faith, the denial of one's own freedom and responsibility, remains a powerful tool for analyzing the ways in which individuals conform to social expectations and evade the burden of making authentic choices. His emphasis on the importance of engaging with the world and taking responsibility for one's actions continues to inspire activists and social reformers who seek to create a more just and equitable society. Sartre's influence extends to post-structuralism and postmodernism, movements that emerged in the latter half of the 20th century and challenged many of the assumptions of traditional philosophy. While post-structuralists and postmodernists often distance themselves from Sartre's existentialism, they nevertheless drew on his insights into the nature of language, subjectivity, and power. Thinkers such as Michel Foucault and Jacques Derrida, while developing their own distinctive approaches, acknowledged Sartre's influence on their work. Foucault, for example, drew on Sartre's concept of freedom to develop his analysis of power relations. Foucault argued that power is not simply a top-down force imposed on individuals, but is rather a dispersed network of relations that permeates all aspects of social life. He saw individuals as both subjects and objects of power, shaped by and also capable of resisting its influence. Sartre's emphasis on individual agency provided a philosophical foundation for Foucault's analysis, suggesting that individuals are never completely determined by power relations, but always retain the capacity to resist and to create their own identities. Derrida, similarly, drew on Sartre's critique of essentialism to develop his theory of deconstruction. Derrida argued that all philosophical concepts are inherently unstable and self-contradictory. He sought to expose these contradictions through a process of deconstruction, revealing the ways in which language and thought are always subject to multiple interpretations. Sartre's emphasis on the contingency of human existence and the absence of inherent meaning provided a philosophical framework for Derrida's deconstructive project, suggesting that all claims to truth and certainty are ultimately grounded in arbitrary assumptions. The continuities between Sartre's thought and these later movements are evident in their shared emphasis on the importance of challenging traditional metaphysics and embracing the contingency of human existence. That his continuities are equally significant. Post-structuralists and postmodernists often rejected Sartre's emphasis on individual agency, arguing that individuals are largely determined by social and linguistic structures. They also questioned Sartre's belief in the possibility of achieving authentic selfhood, suggesting that identity is always fluid, fragmented, and performative. Sartre's legacy continues to be debated and reinterpreted in contemporary philosophical discourse. Some scholars emphasize his contributions to existentialist ethics, arguing that his emphasis on individual responsibility provides a valuable framework for addressing contemporary moral challenges. Others focus on his political philosophy, highlighting his commitment to social justice and his critique of oppressive power structures. Still others explore his literary works, analyzing his novels and plays as expressions of his philosophical ideas. One way to evaluate Sartre's influence is to consider his impact on subsequent thinkers. Simone de Beauvoir, his lifelong companion and intellectual collaborator, extended and developed many of Sartre's ideas in her own groundbreaking work on feminism. Her book, The Second Sex, published in 1941, drew on Sartre's existentialism to analyze the social construction of gender and to challenge the patriarchal structures that limit women's freedom. Beauvoir argued that women are not born with a fixed essence, but are rather shaped by social and cultural forces. She called for women to embrace their freedom and to create their own identities, rejecting the traditional roles and expectations imposed on them by society. Frantz Fanon, a Martiniquan psychiatrist and political philosopher, drew on Sartre's existentialism to analyze the psychological effects of colonialism, and argued that colonialism not only oppresses people politically and economically, but also alienates them from their own culture and identity. He called for colonized people to reclaim their freedom and to create their own sense of self, rejecting the imposed identities and stereotypes of the colonizer. His book, Black Skin, White Masks, published in 1952, remains a classic of post-colonial thought, offering a powerful analysis of the psychological dimensions of racial oppression. Sartre's enduring challenge to traditional metaphysics lies in his assertion that there is no God, no inherent meaning, and no preordained purpose to human existence. This assertion, while unsettling, also offers a profound opportunity. He calls for individuals to embrace their freedom and responsibility, to create their own values, and to shape their own lives. In a world devoid of inherent meaning, individuals are free to define themselves and to create their own purpose. This freedom, while daunting, also empowers individuals to resist oppression, to challenge injustice, and to create a more just and equitable world. Sartre's call for individuals to embrace their freedom and responsibility in a meaningless world continues to resonate with contemporary audiences. In an age of increasing uncertainty and social fragmentation, his existentialism offers a framework for understanding human existence as fundamentally contingent and open-ended. It challenges individuals to confront the absurdity of existence, to reject the temptations of bad faith, and to embrace the responsibility of creating their own meaning. While his work has been subject to criticism and reinterpretation, its enduring influence on philosophy, literature, and social thought is undeniable. His legacy remains a powerful reminder of the importance of individual agency, social engagement, and the ongoing struggle for human freedom.
We really appreciate you tuning in to this AI-powered presentation. Our goal is to push the boundaries of AI in content creation, and your input is invaluable. If there's a particular subject you'd like to see us tackle next, or if you have suggestions on how we could fine-tune our AI's creative prompts, please don't hesitate to leave your ideas in the comments section. We're excited to bring you more unique content very soon.